Thank you, and good evening. It's great to be here. I really need to sort that bio out. That sort of Asian hedge fund thing was from about 6, 7 years ago. And for those of you who know Asia and know the Asian hedge fund industry, you'd know that there are only 26 of us in that industry. So being in the top 25 is no big deal. But it's great to be here in New York. Thank you for having me. Daniel, quite rightly, I mentioned the CFA Institute, or the CFA family mission, really, and I like to start everything anchored with that mission says that we're trying to lead the investment profession through high standards of ethics and education for the ultimate benefit of society. And what better way of making sure that we connect with the society that we serve than the pension fund industry, which involves so many people around the world in a very real sense. I'd like to start tonight with something from Elon Musk, a visionary, as you know. And Musk has proposed building a revolutionary new train system dubbed the Hyperloop. The system will help travel from New York to DC in about 30 minutes, in theory. And that's faster than flying. And for those of you who fly a lot, as I do in this hurricane season, no weather disruptions. And he likens the Hyperloop to a vacuum tube system in a building that we used to use to move documents about when I was a kid. And when you contrast Musk's space-age vision of transportation, really, with the investment management profession, and particularly the pension fund industry, I think, we still in many ways are stuck in the 19th century, in my view. We're still thinking trains and planes when perhaps we should be thinking more about hyperloops. And I make that comment because one of the investment industry's problems, in my opinion, is that it is struggling with an outdated set of assumptions. For instance, when pension funds were set up, people worked for 50 years on average and retired for 5 years. Nowadays, our young people want to work for a maximum of 30 years and retire for 35 years. So, that's tough. That changed aspiration brings with it extremely challenging retirement income investment assumptions and requirements. And I believe we're at a point now where the baby boomers, as they approach retirement, and I know TIA Nuveen are wrestling with this at the moment, that we're very ill-equipped for the path that lies ahead of us. This decumulation phase that a lot of us are about to come into, and obviously, as you can see, I speak from personal worry here, in that I'm shortly to be in that phase. We don't talk about it enough, and we haven't come up with the solutions for it, and I hope that's something that we can discuss today, although obviously in the developing world, they have the exact mirror image of that problem. And I think we have to ask ourselves as investment professionals why we haven't really talked and thought enough about decumulation. And that comes back to my point about trying to connect the investment industry with its purpose. Possibly it's because we all make our living on the balances that are within that retirement scheme industry, and it's not in our interests to let our investors get their hands on it. And so I think that's worth thinking about as we think about what we're really trying to do. In so many ways, our industry is failing to step up to address this issue, and this dramatically impacts our clients and society everywhere. Changing demographics and economics are affecting retirement expectations, the investment management industry, and pension fund structures. And this is a critical challenge where our industry, I hope, can show vision and leadership and raise this standard of professionalism that is at the core of our mission, and hopefully through that win back trust of our stakeholders. So when I spoke at the annual conference last year in Philadelphia, one of the questions I asked is what's finance really for? And I think that is a challenging question. I mean, to the public in general, finance looks as if it's a collection of rather selfish individuals who are in this industry to really make sure that we feather our own nests rather than to serve the communities that we live and work in. And if you believe that attaching finance to a purpose is really what we do for a living, then it's essential to address the challenges that we face in pension fund systems, not just here in the US, but globally. We've witnessed a huge decline in defined benefit pensions over the last 20 years. Between 2001 and 2015, the percentage of US organizations offering traditional DB plans to new hires fell from 45% to an incredibly low 7% now. And as of 2015, 76% of employers sponsored only defined contribution plans for new hires. So we have, over the last 20 years, we've passed financial risks to those least well equipped to deal with that financial risk. And I don't think as an industry we've done enough to help pensioners and would-be pensioners cope with some of those challenges that they face, particularly in the investment environment that's so challenging today. And I know this is a global pension conference, but just to pull it back to the US, today nearly 40 million US households have no retirement assets whatsoever. Zip. Absolutely nothing. And then developing that theme along similar lines, a recent survey by the Employee Benefits Research Institute found that more than 1 in 10 workers, not surprisingly, think they need about $1.5 million of pension assets to retire comfortably. And yet, if you're in the 55 to 64 years age bracket, on average, a US person within that age bracket has about 104,000 US dollars saved up. And the next cohort, the next decade on, if you're between 65 and 74, you've probably only got 148. And you're almost certainly retired with less than $150,000 in your retirement account. So the prospect of millions of Americans retiring with not enough money is really there. It's not looming as an issue, it's on us today. And I think it's a clarion call for our industry to say, well, how can we step up to help solve some of that challenge? How can we use our creativity and technical resources to try and solve those problems? So I think it's now is the time to be asking really how visionary we should be in industry. How do we meet the needs of that older generation, but also meet the needs of the younger generation? And I have 5 kids in their 20s who are all, in theory, you know, they don't listen to me very much at all, but in theory they'll listen to me occasionally on finance matters. And you try telling a 25-year-old that in a zero interest rate environment they need to save between 20 and 25% of their money. And secondly, by the way, you're not going to retire until you're 75, and that's a good deal. And it's an unsaleable proposition, I can assure you. I've tried, but our industry is geared around trying to sell that to young people today, and it's not going to work. They know 75-year-olds, and they know that 75-year-olds don't actually spend much money. And what work have we done to sort of map out how much money you really need when you're 75, 85, 95? Don't you rather need health insurance? Don't you rather need longevity insurance? A pension pot of money may not be the right solution for people today in that environment. So I think those are the challenges that I think we face that will help, if we can help resolve them, will help us reconnect, I hope, with our client base. And one of my favorite themes at the Institute is just that. As an industry, we're suffering from a huge amount of headwind at the moment, whether it's regulators, zero interest rates, robo-advisors. Wherever you look in the world, our industry is under pressure. None of us really, if we're investment professionals, are having too good a time of it because we're not trusted. Our clients are voting with their feet, tend to go into very low-yielding assets. We're losing the public debate. We're really struggling to get a value proposition out there and cemented in people's minds. And I think the retirement scheme conversation is one way in which we can elevate the discourse, one way in which we can reconnect ourselves with the population at large. And what are we doing at the Institute? Well, we're promoting something called the Asset Manager Code of Conduct, which we are promoting actively through pension plans, asset owners, trying to encourage asset owners to encourage the investment managers that they allocate money to work to a higher standard. And we produced a campaign last year in the Wall Street Journal, amongst other journals, to encourage asset managers to do that. And we had over 1.5 trillion US dollars of assets in the pension community behind that campaign. We're engaged through CFA Society New York in a lot of C-suite conversations here in New York and elsewhere to try to raise the standard of the profession in general. And we've had and continue to have great interaction with groups like TIA, groups like State Street and Bank of New York, and increasingly with BlackRock as well. So with the big end of town, all focused around how can we improve the quality of professionalism in the industry. We're also very active in sustainable investing. We're partnered with the PRI, working on 15 events worldwide to talk about sustainable investing, to develop a best practice guide that for different regions that will be published next year. And I know sustainable investing isn't necessarily something that a lot of US people believe in, but as you go around the world, I'm based in Hong Kong. I spend a lot of time in Asia. I spend a lot of time, increasing amount of time in Africa as well. And sustainability is a crucial activity in those markets. And more than that, when you travel around the developing world, the thing that strikes you more than anything else is the investment opportunity that's there. As I say, I spend a lot of time in China. You look at One Belt, One Road. You look at the pollution cleanup that the Chinese have to do and intend to do over the next 10 or 15 years in their economies. Enormous investment opportunity. And yet our role as investment intermediaries seems to me to be broken. That the dollars exist to invest the trillions that are needed in third world infrastructure. But what do is we intermediate through ETFs into the Dow Jones 500 or the S&P or other mainstream stock market indices, the very investment vehicles that are likely to produce the worst possible returns as far as our investors are concerned. So how we break out of that, I think, is a challenge for us all going forward. So I want to shift gears and just praise for a few minutes CFA Society New York. And it's a huge thrill to be able to say CFA Society New York. If you opened your Wall Street Journal today, you would have seen that we started the campaign in conjunction with Daniel and the board here to promote that new name, that we're no longer working under the New York Society of Security Analysts here. And why is that important, really? It's because at the Institute, what we're trying to do is to work exclusively through our societies going forward, to drive all of our engagement with our members through CFA Society New York, to resource them so that they can serve you as members better. So I don't want the Institute to figure in your lives at all. I want to stand behind the curtain, and what you should see is CFA Society New York, your wonderful board, and your full-time executive team here. So it's very important that we stand together, that we work together to try to raise standards within our community. And that name change comes at a great time. It's the 80th anniversary of CFA Society New York, and I'm back here next month to participate in that celebratory event. And this year, CFA Society New York has won 3 awards, not just one, but 3. The snappily named Strategic Initiatives for Delivering Member Value Award, which was in return for over 70 seminars and member-exclusive forums, highly successful conferences that this society has organized. The second award that was won was that they were also chosen by the CFA Institute's Research Foundation to receive the Research Foundation Society Award for Events and Activities. And finally, last but by no means least, it's my very great pleasure to thank Thomas Brigandi here and to congratulate him. He's the inaugural recipient of the Global Outstanding Young Leader Award for his prolific work at CFA Society New York. And I'd like you just to give him a hand. For those of you who have had the misfortune to be on the other end of Thomas's unending stream of emails, you'll know that he thoroughly deserves that award. He's built a team of more than 300 investment professionals globally, in conjunction with 30 other member societies that regularly organize events around the Asset Owner Series, of which this event tonight is a part. So well done, Tom. The pension fund community is one that is particularly dear, as I say, to our family. It's absolutely vital to the interests of connecting ourselves with our purpose as financial professionals. And I can't say enough good words about the work that's going on here at CFA New York.